Good morning, and welcome to this, the first of a two-part series on DORA for credit unions. I'm glad to welcome you all today. We know a lot of you. We have some visitors from outside of Ireland, credit unions in Canada and in the UK, so you're welcome as well. First, for those who don't know us, I won't be presumptuous that you all know us. A few words about ourselves. We're like a lot of you. We're experienced risk and compliance professionals. We offer a software, a GRC software application, a SaaS solution, and many of you are our customers. We have many credit unions customers in Ireland. We're headquartered in Ireland, as you figured out, and our customers generally are in the financial services space, a lot of credit unions, fund management, insurance, payment industries, and other sectors as well. We're in the public sector as well. That's us. We've won a number of awards in the last few years, and hopefully we'll have another few up this year because we're shortlisted for another 2 awards this year. So hope we do well on that. So the introduction's done. This is what we're going to look at today. I'm going to first have one slide overview on DORA, so that those of you who are maybe looking at this for the first time have a bit of context. And then we'll go a little bit deeper into ICT Risk Management. And it's interesting, the C communications, because in the recent Thematic review, they called it IT Risk Management and dropped the C silently, but leave the C in. It's communications, just as important. Third-party risk regarding ICT and incident management. So they're the 3 pillars we're going to look at today, and a bit of advice, one slide at the end, just things you can start doing now. There's only one way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Now, this has been attributed to many people, but I liked the first one that came up, St. Francis of Assisi, though I doubt he ever took a bite out of an elephant. Not his style. But you know the concept, big project, start now and do a bit every week, every month. So let's look at DORA. First of all, it's a regulation. It's not a directive, it's a regulation, which means it's law and it applies to all countries in the European Union. It came into force in 2023, but became applicable in January of this year. And there was a flurry of activity as those to whom it applied had to get a register of information into the regulator by early April. That was fun, I can tell you. It becomes applicable for credit unions on January the 17th, 2028. That's about 853 days from now. So yeah, plenty of time, but do start now. It applies to all financial entities and some of their service providers. If a service provider is so significant in the space, they will be equally compelled to comply with the requirements. Now, it's about, if you ask, well, what is DORA? Digital Operation Resilience Act being its law. It's about making systems that support financial businesses better in the sense that they're more secure, less likely to fail, and faster to get back up and running if they do fail. This was in a word, that's resilient. You want systems to almost heal themselves. So if they fail, they come back very quickly. That, to me, as a former hardware engineer, that's what resilient is. Quick recovery, or don't even go down in the first place. Now, this act actually harmonizes several guidelines that have been around for years and puts it into one that is consistent across the European Union, so that people don't have to follow different regulations if they're operating in several countries. And none of the concepts, to my mind, are really new. This is stuff I think people should be doing already. And the fact that you don't have to comply until, 2028, use that time sensibly, I would say to you. And you must say, why? Why prepare now? Well, don't you want to strengthen your defenses against cyber attacks and other weaknesses in information security? Why would you not? You have to comply, and if you wait until 3 months before the deadline, you will have a lot to do. You will be stressed. So if you start now and pick off, the low-hanging fruit and work out a plan step by step over the next, 28 months, it'll be more manageable. You can spread the cost and spread the burden. It'll be much easier, honestly. So I know some of you are thinking of starting now. I've spoken with some of you in the last few weeks, so I know you are thinking that way. And this is the obvious one, isn't it? Protect your members. Why would you wait until January 2028 before you would do what I consider the right thing? Nothing in DORA is what I would call exceeding members' expectations. Protect the data, their data, protect the information, protect the systems using methods and processes and techniques that are widely in place in other sectors as well. So like I said, a lot of this is just common sense stuff, and I don't see how anybody could object. So start now, folks. Okay, they refer to them as the 5 pillars. It looks more like 4 pillars and a lintel to me, but no matter. We're going to focus on 3: the ICT risk management, the incident management, and the managing of ICT third-party risk. Or is it managing third parties? It's a bit of that too, I think. That's the DORA, and this is the graphic from the Central Bank of Ireland. They like these kind of graphics. You remember this one? They just recently in July updated their operational resilience guidance across industry guidance. Now you might ask, well, why when DORA is there? Because DORA is, in a way, includes all of the things that are in the across industry guidance. But I put it up there because some of you have already probably embarked on a project to get compliant with with this guidance, and that's a good approach, because a lot, and I'll go into it in more detail shortly, but certainly this might be a good starting point. And just to give you a third view, hopefully you all, certainly those of you in Ireland, will know that in the last 9 months or 12 months, the regulator conducted what they call a thematic review under these 4 headings, and issued a Dear John letter. If you haven't seen the letter, do read it. There's about 36 things that they say where credit unions are wanting. They assessed 8 credit unions and have identified things like, and I think this is the cardinal sin, you having a policy, an information security policy, and then you're not following your own policy. Now that'll always anger a regulator if you're not doing what you say you're doing. That's what they fine you for, not for not having the policy, but for not actually following your own policy and procedures. So yes, IT security and cyber risk management is basically about the identifying the risks in IT and putting in controls to minimize them. Continuity management, yeah, business continuity, having plans to get things back up and running quickly. IT governance and risk management, well, that's the governance side. It's not another IT risk management. It's actually the governance of it, having people responsible, measuring it, checking that you're actually doing what you said you would do. And I think from my reading of it, the governance, there are a lot of gaps in the governance. And then the outsourcing. And again, they call it outsourcing. The more generic term I would say is third parties, something you've outsourced to somebody else, and not just a service. I mean, you could outsource, you could have suppliers, you could have contractors, you could have service providers, you can have different types of third parties. But yeah, do read that letter. Again, that might be a starting point for you. And all of this is in DORA in any case. So back to DORA. And I've no authority to say this, and I'm not saying that it is what they're going to say to you, but there is a simplified risk management framework from Article 16. And if you're categorized in the smaller category, then you're exempt from some of the more the detailed requirements. Now, I'm not saying don't look at the detailed requirements, because a lot of them are still good things to do for everybody. But if you wanted a place to start, then look at Article 16, at the simplified ICT risk management framework. And the starting point is having a documented, and that's important, a documented ICT risk management framework. You know, saying who's responsible, what the policies are, what are you going to do, setting out how you're going to do it, having that framework that you can then work towards. Continuously monitor the security and functioning of IT systems. I mean, do you know if anybody is trying to break in? Do you know that you have hackers trying the door every day of your IT systems? We do. We know. We see brute force attacks every day, but we're aware of it, and we're monitoring. Use appropriate. This is the language, by the way, and I've left in the words so that you'll get a copy of this afterwards, so you have a bit more than just 2 words of a bullet point. But use appropriate, resilient, and updated ICT systems, protocols, and tools. And what that is saying is, keep your systems up to date. I mean, in one of the findings in the thematic review, they found people, one organization was using Windows 7 on a system. Windows 7. We're on Windows 11 now. If that gets hacked and you get hacked and you're using an unpatched, outdated operating system, then I'm sorry, you'll get no sympathy certainly not from the regulator. Identify and detect anomalies in network and information systems. I mean, there are techniques, there's technologies that will detect the anomalies, the things that are unusual maybe for your behavior. And it's a good way of detecting maybe the presence of somebody in your network who shouldn't be there. If you have an ICT-related incident, have a good process to handle it swiftly. Now, ICT incidents are handled in a separately, but as part of risk management, keeping the incident small and not letting a small incident become a major event. And that's the risk you really want to avoid here. Identify key dependencies on ICT third-party service providers. So I know for a lot of credit unions, for most of you are all dependent probably on a third party for your ICT, for your banking system. Any others? I mean, it's not just the banking system. Look beyond just the one system. How about your own servers, for your own systems, for your own applications, and who else you're dependent upon for that? But identify the key dependencies, because if you haven't identified them, then you're probably not aware of certain risks. So identification is the first step. In DORA, they require you to have a methodology to identify who's critical. Who's a critical supplier, but more importantly, what's a critical function or service that you're offering? And how do you determine which of those services are critical? If you're offering loans, if that's the core of your business, then to not be able to offer loans, you might say, well, that's critical. We might as well close the doors permanently. But are there other things that are less critical? And how do you decide what's critical? I'm not going to attempt to tell you which of your services are critical, but you need to decide that, and you need to have a methodology that you can explain as to how you arrived at that, what's critical. Because the next step is to say, well, for these critical services that we're offering, that we deem critical, who do we depend upon? What third parties do we depend upon to be able to deliver that service? And that's an exercise you need to go through. Because when you know who you depend upon, then you need to assess the risks associated with them. If they're in another country, is there some geographical risks there, weather risks? If they're a single supplier, and if they were financially not stable and they were to go out of business, does that bring you down as well? These are all things you need to be cognizant of. Whether what the risks are, and what mitigation you need to put in place. When you know what's important, when you know what's critical and who you depend upon, you can complete your business continuity plans and talk about the recovery measures. But one of the criticisms in the thematic review was that there seemed to be a disparity between people's backup regime, how often they were making backups and taking backups, and the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective. So you need to have joined up thinking here. If you're going to say we're going to be back in 2 hours and we're going to have a recovery point objective of 1 hour, that is, we're not going to lose more than 1 hour's data in any incident, then if you're making backups every 4 hours and don't have the intermittent backups, how can you recover back to 1 hour? As you think that's obvious, and yet the bank have found there was a disparity in some credit unions they looked at. An untested plan really is, how should I put it? There are many quotes over the years of, plans fail at first confrontation with the enemy. I have found through my career and time in different areas that it's only when you test plans that you find if they work and where the weaknesses are. And this is something the regulator has been harping on about for years now. You don't have to pull the switch and do a major disaster kind of recovery. But test the backup. Have you tried restoring backups? A lot of restores of backups fail because the backup didn't happen in the first place. So test units and then test, do a scenario analysis, but test your plans. And when you do test, or when you do have an incident, you will have a bit of intelligence, a bit of knowledge that you can then apply to improve your systems. It's basically a plan, do, check, act. You plan, you do it, you test it, and then you fix the gaps. Review that framework periodically, because you might set it up in the first few months, but 6 months later you realize you need to make a few adjustments. That's perfectly normal, and it's healthy. So, and when it's up and running, then it's probably an annual process that you would look at your framework, your ICT framework, and make tweaks of it to adjust to what's happening at that time and the context and how it changes. Have an attitude of continuous improvement. Don't ever feel that we're good now, we don't have to do any more. Because as soon as you say that, you start going backwards. So continuously improve and have the continuous mindset that you will improve. You may be called upon to submit a report at any time. So if you have that in the back of your mind and you continuously improve, you won't fear having to generate that report. Okay, now for the scary bit, but stay calm. In the RTS, DORA was an act, a law that came out, and part of that act was that the authorities would produce regulatory technical standards and implementation technical standards, ITS and RTS, where they give the detail on the how and what's expected. This one is 41 articles and over 300 requirements. The numbers in brackets are the requirements under each of these articles of things that you're expected to do. That looks scary. Now, the good news is hopefully you're doing a lot of this already. And probably the better news is that the ones that I've colored here in yellow are from the exempted organizations. If you're one of the smaller ones and you don't have to comply with everything, comply with the 28 to 41. Now, I would say to start with them. It may be that you have to comply with all of them and certainly look at all of them. But if you're looking for a place to start, I would start with, look at the thematic review, look at the cross-industry guidance, and then look at these 28 to 41. I'm not going to go through each of these individually. They make sense, even at the headings. Governance is a big one. Policies and procedures and classification. A lot of this is governance, I think, having it in place and then doing it, Let's look at the cross-industry guidance, because this might be an easy place to start. And I've tagged a few with DORA here, where there's a strong overlap. But you could argue that the first 5 or 6 here are about governance. I know the first 2 are down as governance in the guideline, but really it's having the framework in place, and somebody's responsible, and there's the reporting, and there's the policy, and there's the arrangements in place to ensure it happens. It's what the board and senior management do to make sure it happens, and then do it, and then check it that it's happening. The interdependencies and mapping your critical functions is important. Now, if you have a business continuity plan, then you've probably done a business impact analysis, a BIA, in the past. The BIA is where you identify what it is you're doing and then look at those individually and look at the dependencies, the people dependencies, the technology, the hardware, the software, the facilities you need. I mean, maybe you need the internet. This is the communications, the C in ICT. And we forget it sometimes. It's not just, it's not just for voice, but we need that connection to the internet more so now than ever. What are your dependencies? And then on that BIA, then what are the third-party dependencies that you depend upon to deliver that service? I'm going to say service. And then in that BIA, you will put in things like the recovery time objective, the recovery point objective, the maximum tolerable outage, what the regulator calls the impact metrics. This is nothing new. It's in the guidelines. You've known about it for years. So my advice would be get compliant with the cross-industry guidance. And if you're there already, then it's a good starting point. The one that probably and was in the thematic review that people hadn't done well was how do you determine what's critical? How do you determine which service is critical? And I think it can be down to 3 questions. I'm going to give you an example here, but don't take this as Bible. You got to figure this out yourself. But it might be like, are more than 30% of our members reliant on the service? Or would a disruption to the service cause financial loss to our members? Or would a disruption to the service damage our reputation? And if the answer to any of those questions is yes, then maybe it's critical. Now, I'm just giving those as examples. You got to figure your own out, but maybe take that kind of approach, where you have 3 questions, and if the answer to any one of them is a yes, and you say, well, it's critical, and that might be you might find the right questions to ask. Don't tag everything as critical. Define what you mean by critical, and I think by asking questions, it's a good place to start. So there's 2 DORA ones there: the interdependencies on third parties, the ICT resilience, and the other DORA one is the incident management. There's good overlap with the cross-industry guidance. Testing, that's also in DORA, the resilience testing. We'll cover that in 2 weeks' time. And the business continuity, it's a fundamental element of resilience, that you have your business continuity plans and figure out, what do you need to get back up and running in what sequence. Again, your business impact analysis would have informed that, and you've been doing that for years. It's all part of the operational resilience. And the other key one I would point out here is the lessons learned. Whether you have an incident or whether it's an exercise, learn from those. It's key intelligence. That if you have a disruption, you say, well, what could we have done better in response? What could we have done to prevent it in the first place? Okay. I think from a time point of view, I think I'm okay. But I do want to cover the third party and the incident management. So I've got 4 or 5 more slides. It's entitled Managing ICT Third-Party Risks. And certainly for the register of information that organizations submitted, the focus was on those suppliers that delivered ICT services. And there's about 23 categories of ICT services. I would say to you that when you're setting up, arrangements to manage your third parties, don't make it exclusive to ICT, make it inclusive of all, because doesn't it make sense to have good management, good oversight of all your third parties? So certainly for DORA, you need to give focus to the ICT third parties, but I would say never do it exclusively, because when you do it inclusively, you're mitigating all risk, not just the ICT risk. It's an opportunity, so don't waste it. Remember, it's the risks you're managing, and these are they're described as I'll describe it as risks due to the third parties, or that when you take on a third party, there are different risks than if you were doing it all in-house. Some similar and some completely different. So you need to identify those risks, but you don't want 2 risk registers. You want one overarching risk register with all your risks in it. So do it in the same framework. Again, the governance part, you have a strategy for third parties. What will you outsource? For a lot of you, you've already outsourced maybe the banking application. But still, you know, are there other things that you will or will not outsource? What is your policy on this, and what will you keep in-house always? Now, this language was written for maybe large financial organizations with lots of systems, but the principles are the same. You know, decide what will you keep in-house and what will you never outsource. And maybe you've done that already. For most of you, I'd imagine you already have a lot of third parties in place. I'm saying third parties, I'm not putting ICT in front of it. And again, what the regulator found was that in some cases, there was no signed contract, there was no renewal date. You know, kind of key things in a contract, I would imagine, is the renewal date, that you decide, well, do we continue with the supplier, or do we go and find somebody else, or you need to get out? So there's a point in a contract where you have an opportunity to say, we'll renew for another year, another 3 years, or we make changes. When you sign a contract with somebody, though, there are risks that are brought with it in terms of there's data protection risks. There's, I'll call it, geographical risks. If they've got subcontractors in another country, there might be labor risks. You know, you need to understand your extended organization. Think of it that way. You've outsourced a big chunk to this organization here who might be outsourcing to a fourth party or a subcontractor. You need to be aware of that, because that now is your organization. And you need to understand all of the risks, not just, you know, a system failing. Maintain a register of information in relation to all contractual arrangements. That seems like small as an Excel spreadsheet, but for the report for the regulator, it was 15 tabs on a spreadsheet, and every piece of information you could imagine about that contractual arrangement. That was fun, and we got about 20 customers through that process back in April, and it was painful for everybody, but we got through it because, well, ask anybody who's been through that. Everybody had a bit of pain. And yeah, you've got to make that available when they ask for it. You have to, if you're planning to outsource, and I don't know how many would actually have plans, you probably have it done already, you got to inform the regulator. That's a small one. Now, it says here before entering contractual arrangements. I imagine a lot of you have already entered. So if you are in contractual arrangements, it still makes sense to do your due diligence, you know, and review the contract and see what does it cover, and are they supporting a critical function? And you need to review these. So forget about the before, but for all contractual arrangements, if you're just going to do them or you've already entered into them, you need to do these things and then identify the risks. Does the person you're contracting with satisfy the supervisory conditions? You know, are they approved, or do they need to be approved? But you need to do due diligence on the third party, because, as I said, they're an extension of your organization, and you need to know that they're as solid as you are. What if that third party is providing service for your competitor? Where does that put you in terms of priority if there's an issue, and who gets fixed first? You know, think about it. You would imagine it goes without saying that third-party providers must comply with appropriate information security standards. Certainly, if they're looking after, we take the biggest one, the banking systems, and looking after your customer information and very confidential information, then you want the highest levels of security. So expect high standards. Now, I was talking to Sandy about this the other day, and she said, of course, keeping with the elephant theme, there is an elephant in the room here, and that's if you're risk and compliance people, you're not necessarily skilled in IT, and maybe it's a bit daunting that you've got to understand these IT risks, and you're not an IT person. Well, that is, I think, an elephant in the room, and I think it's obvious from the thematic review that there was an absence of some skills there. But guys, it's not insurmountable. Depending on the size of the credit union, there's ways of doing this. You know, you can bring in experts when you need them, or you can acquire skills to a certain level so that you need less expertise. I'll talk about it later. We're running a workshop in November, and I would say it's aimed at the non-techies, but it's about IT risk management, to try and take a bit of the mystery out of that. But let me give you an example. If you have an IT information security policy that says that you will change default passwords on systems, right? Does anybody check that the password has been defaulted? Well, the regulator did, and they found in the thematic review that somebody was still using a password that was 5 years old and not changed from the default. So if you're going to have it in a policy, I think some of these things are easy to check, even by asking a question. So if there is some technical complexity, and if you're going to have auditors to check that you're doing things, make sure they have the skills. But I'd encourage you to acquire some skills yourselves. Trust me, you're never too old to learn, never. Maintain strong rights of termination of contractual arrangements. You got to keep in control of this. If you see things going south in the third party, or you're not getting the service you need to achieve your objectives, then you need to be able to get out of that contract. So you need strong rights of termination. And if they're not in it and it's up for renewal, then maybe when you do the renewal, it's time to get the contract and the terms and conditions in the contract up to proper spec, I would say. Certainly something I noticed in the Register of Information, one of the things that we're looking for is, do you have an exit strategy? I mean, you could decide to get out of the contract, or the third party might decide they're getting out of the business. It's the same thing. You got to move maybe to another supplier. You need to think about it. You need to think about what your options are. Maybe keep contact with your supplier's biggest competitor, so that if you ever did have to exit quickly, you're not starting from zero. But yes, you'll find that certainly by January 2028, the regulator will be saying, what's your exit strategy? Not if you have one, but what is it? And have you tested? What have you done to test your own exit strategy? Incident management. We're nearly there, folks. 3 minutes, okay? And I'll be finished. Give you a chance to ask some questions. If you have questions, put them into the Q&A anytime. Bit of governance first, setting up the process. Early warning indicators. I looked after an IT room once, and we had a VESDA, a very early smoke detector. And I think it's a good concept too for any incident management. People talk about key risk indicators, early warning indicators. If systems are failing when you're busy, always seems to fail at 1 o'clock on a Friday. Why does things break? And comes back again half an hour later. Well, maybe it's telling you something. Maybe something is nearly at the breaking point. And don't wait for it to break. If you suspect something, it's probably I like to think of it as the tremors, that precede an earthquake. And don't ignore them. Don't ignore them. So identify what they are. Have procedures in place for your instance. When you have an incident, that everything is recorded. Roles and responsibilities. This is, if you like, the framework really around incident management. Whose responsibilities, what roles do people have? What are people's individual responsibilities for reporting incidents and recording them? And communication plans. Know that if you have an incident, depending on the nature of the incident, you may have to communicate with customers, with members, with the regulator. So know your responsibilities and build plans into your processes. And of course, the key one here is the incident response plan that you put in place. Now, I would say record all incidents, no matter how large or small. You will learn from all of them, okay? This looks like a lot of detail, and certainly if you have a large incident, this is what the regulator will want you to record. It's kind of scary. For a major ICT incident, they want something like 76 pieces of information. but start with, I've tried to keep it to the high level stuff here. When you have an incident, it'd be good to know how many members were affected, because maybe you have an impact tolerance metric that says, if more than X% of our members are affected by this, we consider this a significant incident. Geographical spread, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability, authenticity. When you're thinking of information security, think of those four things, because it might be the confidentiality that's impacted. It might be availability. Systems are just down because you've no power. We've a severe weather event and you've no power and you can't do any business. The major ICT incidents that affect a lot of people have to be reported to the regulator, as I said. And the last one is the may. If you become aware of a significant threat, it's up to you whether you share that information with the regulator or the cybersecurity center. I would say sharing is caring. Finally, folks, can I do a summary on that bit by bit or bite by bite, eating the elephant? I would say start now. I'll start at the bottom here and say start now, and do a gap analysis. See where you're at. Look at the 100 things maybe you should be doing and see how many of those 100 things are you doing today already. And then pick the easy ones. It's great for motivation if you can do another 5 or 10 fairly quickly that are easy to do, and you can start ticking off those. And very quickly that elephant that you got to eat bit by bit gets smaller and smaller. The easy things, identifying the critical functions, the activities that you're doing. But maybe before that, decide how are you going to identify them? What is the criteria for saying that's critical? That's where you'll have the arguments. Once you agree on that, it'll be easy to identify them. The dependencies, the people, the technology, the facilities. This you need to do for business impact analysis anyway, but you need to identify, I guess, certainly for DORA, the third parties, but do the full job. Identify your IT assets. And this is another key one. Do you know where every PC, laptop, server, system, where it's located? Do you have a tag number? Do you have an owner for that? Because only if you have a list of all of your assets, can you start to reassure anybody that the information contained therein is protected. Imagine if you had a computer with information on it. It's not on your asset register, not subject to change management, not subject to patching. So identify the assets. Identify what's in place today, what protection measures. You'll have firewalls, you'll have antivirus, good stuff in place. But are things up to date? Is your browser up to date? We update our browsers quite regularly. You only have to go into Help About and it'll update the browser. It's not on this list, but one that was in the thematic review was they found that individuals in credit unions, employees, had loaded software onto the computers they're working, software that wasn't approved by the company. They were able to load on it. I can tell you in our organization, nobody can load anything on. There's approved application list. And if you want a new application, that has to go through an approval process, but you cannot load any software on the system. I think if you want operational resilience in an organization, I think there needs to be somebody at the top table who's the champion, somebody who's at director level, who will be your supporter at board meetings if you're the one who's doing it and you need the support from above. Have a policy. Start with a policy. What do you expect? What do you want? What do you want to achieve and why? And let that be the imprimatur, if you like, for everybody else to say, we're doing this and this is why, and this is what we want to achieve. And exercise your plans. When you do have plans, exercise them. You will find gaps. Don't beat anybody up. Just fix the gaps. Okay. That's it. I've left probably 6 minutes, but I hope that's enough. We have quite a few people, and I can see there is a question already. By the way, just that event, 13th of November in Kileshin Hotel in Portlaoise, we're going to do, it's like a workshop to see, how can we better manage IT risk? So if you're a non-IT person and you want to acquire skills, I think that will be useful. So talk to us about that. Hi, Philip. Not sure if this is the right forum, but can you advise of any modules available through calQurisk software to assist with DORA compliance and or the Register of Information? Oh, I love it, Philip. Thank you, Philip. Give me a sales opportunity. Yeah, we have third parties module where you can put in lots of detail, all for the outsourcing register and for the register of information, all the details on third parties. We have we call it the processes module, where you can capture all that business impact analysis information about each process, the dependencies. You can actually map graphically a process as well. We're using the BPMN mapping technology. It's available on the web, but half the world uses BPMN. There's that in it, and then we have checklists. We've codified the whole of DORA, so you can go through and answer questions to do your gap analysis. So happy to talk to people about that. Send us an email to myself. You see my email address there, or to the help desk. Nigel, are you able to provide templates that you can use recommend for your asset register, risk register? Short answer is yes. And indeed, we've added functionality recently called registers. And where this came from was that we realized that for a major ICT incident, we needed a fairly sophisticated form to capture all the information. And we said, rather than develop a form with 76 fields that has only one purpose, we developed a form that we can have many templates and limitless in the number of templates. And then we realized, well, people have registers for incidents, they've registers for assets, they've registers for conflicts, they've registers for gifts, registers for obligations. So we actually have a template for assets, but if you don't like it or want a few extra fields, you can add to it as well. So that's our registers module, and that's the latest edition. So yes, and we do have templates for that. For the risk register, we have a default risk register in the system. Happy to talk to you, Nigel. I take it you're not a customer yet, so be very happy to talk to you. Anything else, folks? The other date, I would say this day fortnight, we'll do the rest of DORA, the testing and the sharing of knowledge, and a case study, maybe looking at somebody who's doing this. Okay, we still have a couple of minutes. I think I've answered one question that usually gets asked about copies of the slides. I did put a lot of words in the slides so that, because we always give out copies of the slides, so you will get a copy, and there's a decent bit of text there. So you'll get that. And somebody's asking about the recording. We don't send the recording out, but we'll send you a link. When we send you the slides, we'll send you a link to the recording. We have a YouTube channel, and certainly if you subscribe to it and you miss one of these events, you'll be able to pick up the recording in the channel. So yeah, when you find it, subscribe to it, and you'll get a notification whenever we put in another recording. We have webinars nearly every week on some different topics. Check our website, always updated and easy to register, as you found. Is that it? Okay, then I think it's the first time that I'm going to finish early. Was there another one? Hold on. We're currently Cyber Essentials Plus, like ourselves, ISO 27001, and working on 9001 shortly. Is this enough? There is mention of attaining other standards, but have found there is crossover with some and seems excessive. Are we okay with just these, or are there others you recommend? Okay, from an IT point perspective, NIST to NIST 2. It's a cyber risk framework, and it's a US based thing. NIST is the National Institute for Technology and Standards. It's different in that it describes the outcomes you want to achieve. It's not telling you how. It does give examples, but it's not saying you must do this and do this. It's saying you need to achieve this, and how you achieve it is up to you. I think it's healthier to do it that way, because the feeling is if you do everything that it says in 27,000, well, I can tell you that there's 3 things about incident management, and that's not enough. So if you're going to rely on standards, then do 27,035 as well. That'll cover the incident management bit. But I would say, Nigel, read, the DORA Act is 76 pages, I think, about 76. Read the 76 pages and then start looking at the RTS and ITS. You're doing a lot of this stuff already. Certainly, if you're ISO 27001 accredited, you will be a lot along the way to being compliant. But that's not the ask. The ask here is that you're compliant with DORA. So certainly read DORA. You have time. And as I said, start now and spread it out over the next 28 months, because you won't do it in 3 months or 6 months, or depending where you're starting and the resources you have. But why bring that pain on yourself when you could be benefiting from it now, certainly with the easy stuff? So I'm going to leave it at that and say, start now, folks. I'm just looking, did another one come in while I was talking? Okay, that's a thank you. Thank you for your time. See you again maybe in 2 weeks' time, and check our website for other events. Thank you. Bye-bye.